A millionaire paid for a struggling elderly woman's groceries. The next day, she received a mysterious envelope that changed everything. No one could have imagined what would happen next. A story of resilience and hope that will touch your heart. Welcome back. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and enjoy the story. The supermarket was busier than usual that Thursday afternoon. Among the shoppers was Felianor, a 72-year-old retired school teacher, carefully examining price tags and reluctantly returning items to the shelves. Her weathered hands trembled slightly as she calculated costs on a small notepad. With inflation skyrocketing, her modest pension barely covered essentials. Today, she had to choose between buying her heart medication or food for the week. Felianor's silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and despite her financial struggles, she maintained an air of dignity in her well-worn but impeccably clean clothes. She had spent decades molding young minds, teaching them not just academic subjects, but values that would guide them throughout their lives. Now, in her golden years, she found herself pinching pennies and making painful choices about necessities. As she approached the checkout counter, she mentally calculated the total once more, hoping she had enough to cover the bare minimum she needed. The young cashier greeted her with a smile that Felianor returned, though her eyes betrayed her anxiety. "That will be 78 out of 42, ma'am," the cashier announced. Felianor's heart sank. It was more than she had anticipated. "I'm sorry, dear, but I'll need to put back a few items," she said apologetically, her voice steady despite her embarrassment. She began sorting through her cart, deciding which necessities she could live without. The small gift she had picked out for her granddaughter's birthday was the first to go, followed by fresh fruit and her favorite tea. Standing behind her in line was Nathaniel, a self-made tech entrepreneur in his late 40s, casually dressed in jeans and a plain sweater that concealed his considerable wealth. His observant eyes had been following Felianor's calculations and the careful way she returned items to the shelves. He watched as she apologetically asked the cashier to remove several items, and something in her dignified struggle struck a chord within him. Without hesitation, Nathaniel stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Please add those items back. I'd like to pay for the lady's groceries." Felianor turned to him, startled. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly—" "I insist," Nathaniel said with a warm smile. "My company runs a community support program, and this is part of our outreach." It wasn't entirely true, but it seemed like the easiest way to overcome her obvious reluctance. "That's very kind, but I don't accept charity," Felianor replied firmly, her pride evident in the straightening of her shoulders. Nathaniel considered her for a moment, recognizing the dignity that refused to be diminished by circumstances. "It's not charity, ma'am. Think of it as a random act of kindness. Maybe someday you can pass it on to someone else." Something in his sincere expression made Felianor hesitate. The cashier and the people in line waited patiently, and Felianor felt a flush creeping up her neck at being the center of attention. Finally, with a small nod, she acquiesced. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice thick with emotion she struggled to contain. As Nathaniel paid for the groceries, including the small gift for her granddaughter that she had set aside, Felianor stood tall, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. He helped her bag the groceries and carried them to the bus stop despite her protests. "I'm Nathaniel Porter," he introduced himself as they waited for her bus. "Felianor Wilder," she replied, offering her hand. His grip was firm and reassuring. "I don't know how to thank you properly, Mr. Porter." "Knowing that I could help is thanks enough," he said. "Everyone needs a hand sometimes." As her bus approached, Felianor turned to him one last time. "You're a good man, Mr. Porter. There aren't many like you left in this world." Nathaniel watched the bus pull away, thinking about the retired teacher and the quiet dignity with which she faced her struggles. The encounter could have ended there, a random act of kindness between strangers, but something about Felianor had resonated with him on a deep level. Perhaps it was her resemblance to his own grandmother, who had raised him after his parents' death, or perhaps it was simply the recognition of a soul that gave much to the world but asked for little in return. That evening, in his spacious, but modestly furnished home, Nathaniel couldn't get Felinor off his mind. He had noticed the address on one of her shopping bags, Oakwood Apartments, a modest senior living complex on the east side of Chicago. His company, Nextech Solutions, sometimes hosted technology workshops at the community center, adjacent to those apartments. He recalled seeing her there once or twice, her attention focused intently on learning to use email to communicate with her family. Making a decision, Nathaniel prepared an envelope containing a prepaid credit card with a substantial sum and a note. For your needs and those birthday gifts. No strings attached. The next morning he drove to Oakwood Apartments and slipped the envelope into her mailbox, hoping it would ease her burdens without wounding her pride. The following day, Felinor found the envelope in her mailbox. Opening it, she was stunned to discover the prepaid credit card and the note. Her hands trembled, but this time not from age or infirmity, but from shock. How did he know where she lived? Who was this mysterious benefactor, really? The amount loaded onto the card was substantial, more money than she had seen at once in years. Her first instinct was to return it. Pride had been her companion through hard times, and accepting such charity felt like surrendering a piece of herself. But as she sat in her small, neat apartment, surrounded by photographs of her late husband Gerald and their family, she reconsidered. The medication she needed was expensive. Her granddaughter's birthday was approaching. The winter had been harsh, and her heating bills were mounting. Perhaps she thought this wasn't just about her. Perhaps accepting help when offered graciously was its own form of generosity, allowing others the blessing of giving. Gerald would have said so. He always had more wisdom about such matters than her stubborn heart allowed. With careful deliberation, Felinor decided to use a small portion of the gift, just enough for her medication and her granddaughter's present. The rest she would save for true emergencies. Having made this decision, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in months, she slept without the gnawing anxiety about tomorrow's needs. What Felinor didn't know was that Nathaniel had recognized her from the local community center, where his company occasionally hosted technology workshops for seniors. Through discreet inquiries with the center's director, he had learned about her situation, a dedicated teacher who had spent her savings caring for her late husband during his long illness, now living alone and struggling to maintain her dignity on a fixed income. Nathaniel's interest in Felinor wasn't merely charitable. Something about her reminded him of his grandmother, Elizabeth, who had raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was just 8 years old. Elizabeth had been a teacher, too, with the same quiet strength and dignity that Felinor possessed. She had sacrificed everything to give him opportunities, working multiple jobs to put him through college. By the time his tech company found success, Elizabeth was gone, leaving Nathaniel with wealth but a lingering sense that he had never properly repaid her sacrifice. Perhaps in helping Felinor, he could honor Elizabeth's memory. It wasn't about assuaging guilt. His grandmother would have been the first to say he owed her nothing, but about recognizing the value of those who give their lives to nurturing others, only to find themselves forgotten or disregarded in their later years. 2 weeks later, Nathaniel was surprised to see Felinor at the community center, attending a computer basics class he was teaching as a volunteer. She sat in the back row, her attention focused on the screen, occasionally jotting notes in a small notebook. Her presence both delighted and unnerved him. Had she connected him to the anonymous gift? Would she be angry at what might seem like deception? After class, as the other seniors filed out, Felinor approached him. "Mr. Porter," she said, her voice steady, "I believe I have you to thank for more than just groceries." Nathaniel felt heat rising to his face, unaccustomed to being caught off guard. "Mrs. Wilder, No explanations necessary," she interrupted gently. "But I'd like you to know that I've used some of your gift to buy my heart medication and a birthday present for my granddaughter. The rest I'm saving for essential needs." Her eyes, clear and direct, met his. "I'm not entirely comfortable with accepting such generosity, but I'm grateful nonetheless." "I'm glad I could help," Nathaniel replied, relieved that she wasn't offended. "My grandmother raised me after my parents died. She was a teacher like you." She worked herself to exhaustion to give me opportunities. I guess I see something of her in you. Felenor's expression softened. She must have been proud of the man you've become. I hope so, Nathaniel said. She didn't live to see the success of my company. I always wished I could have made her life easier in her later years. Sometimes the greatest gift is knowing that what you've given has borne fruit, Felenor replied. I'm sure she knew that. As they continued talking, Nathaniel was struck by Felenor's sharp mind and her curiosity about the digital world. My granddaughter says I need to join the 21st century, she explained with a self-deprecating smile. She's probably right. There's so much I don't understand about all this technology. It's never too late to learn, Nathaniel assured her. Why don't you come to our advanced class next week? We're covering online shopping and banking, practical skills that might be useful. Perhaps I will, Felenor said, gathering her things. Thank you again, Mr. Porter, for everything. Nathaniel, please, he corrected gently. Nathaniel, she echoed, offering a small smile before departing. Over the next few weeks, Felenor became a regular at the technology classes. Nathaniel observed her progress with growing admiration. Despite initial struggles, she persevered with determination that belied her years. Her questions were thoughtful, revealing a mind that remained sharp and engaged. During one session focused on internet research, Nathaniel noticed Felenor, searching for craft supplies, yarn, embroidery hoops, and fabric paint. When he inquired, she explained that before her husband's illness, she had supplemented their income by selling handcrafted items, knitted scarves, embroidered pillowcases, and hand-painted greeting cards. With a modest investment from the prepaid card, she planned to purchase supplies and begin crafting again. It's not just about the money, she explained, her eyes brightening with enthusiasm. Creating beautiful things has always brought me joy. During Gerald's illness, there wasn't time or energy for it. Now I find myself yearning to return to that part of myself. Nathaniel, intrigued by this glimpse into her past passions, encouraged her efforts. Have you ever considered selling your creations online? There are platforms specifically for handcrafted items that might reach a broader audience than local craft fairs. Felenor's expression turned skeptical. At my age, learning to sell things on the internet? I don't know, Nathaniel. That seems like quite a leap from just learning to send emails. One step at a time, he suggested. Complete the basics course first, and if you're interested, I could show you how these platforms work. No pressure, just an option to consider. If you are enjoying the story, type 5 in the comments and subscribe for more videos like this. If not, type 0. It helps me create even better content for you. Continuing. Felenor's stubborn independence initially made her resist his advice. I don't need charity or business lessons, she told him firmly during their next encounter. Her fierce pride and determination were characteristics that had helped her survive challenging times, but now they became obstacles to accepting help. Nathaniel recognized the tension and backed off, respecting her boundaries. Of course, it was just a suggestion. You know what's best for your situation. Meanwhile, Felenor had begun crafting again in her small apartment. The familiar motions of knitting needles and embroidery hoops brought comfort and a sense of purpose to her days. She worked diligently, creating pieces that reflected her artistic sensibility, delicate embroidery featuring Chicago landmarks, cozy scarves in subtle, elegant patterns, and greeting cards adorned with hand-painted florals, inspired by the community garden she tended in warmer months. As her collection grew, so did her confidence. She sold a few pieces at the community center's monthly social gathering, earning modest but satisfying returns. The joy on customers' faces when they received her creations rekindled something long dormant within her, pride in her skills and the knowledge that she was still capable of contributing something beautiful to the world. One evening, as Felenor worked on an intricate embroidery of the Chicago skyline, her phone rang. It was her daughter Caroline calling from Seattle. Their relationship had been strained for years, with Caroline's move across the country creating both physical and emotional distance. Conversations were typically brief and superficial, focusing on Caroline's children and avoiding deeper issues. Mom, Lily loved the embroidered bookmark you sent for her birthday, Caroline began, Referring to Felenor's 12-year-old granddaughter, she was showing it to her friends online. Apparently, handmade things are trending now. There was a hint of surprise in her voice, as though she couldn't quite believe her mother had inadvertently aligned with contemporary taste. "I'm glad she enjoyed it," Felinor replied, pleased but cautious. Their conversations often began pleasantly, only to deteriorate into old tensions. "She mentioned something about you taking computer classes," Caroline continued, her tone questioning. "Yes, at the community center. They offer free workshops for seniors. I can email Lily directly now, instead of sending everything through you." There was a brief silence before Caroline spoke again. That's really great, Mom. I'm impressed that you're learning new skills." The subtle note of approval in her daughter's voice warmed Felinor. "It's never too late to learn," she said, echoing Nathaniel's words. "Actually, I've started crafting again, knitting, embroidery, the things I used to make when you were little." "I remember," Caroline said, her voice softening with nostalgia. "You made that purple sweater, so I wore until it practically fell apart. And those Christmas stockings with our names." "I still have the patterns," Felinor admitted. "I could make new stockings for the grandchildren if you'd like." "They'd love that," Caroline replied, an unexpectedly enthusiastic response. "Mum, have you ever thought about selling your crafts online? Lily's friend's mother does something similar on Etsy. It's this website for handmade goods." Felinor couldn't help but laugh. "That's exactly what a friend suggested recently. I thought it sounded far-fetched for someone my age." "Not at all. If you're already comfortable with email, it wouldn't be a huge leap. I could help you get set up next time I visit." The offer hung in the air, laden with significance. Caroline hadn't visited in over 2 years, always finding reasons why Felinor should come to Seattle instead, a trip that had become increasingly difficult as travel costs rose and Felinor's health made long flights challenging. "I'd like that," Felinor said carefully, not wanting to pressure her daughter but hoping the offer was genuine. "Maybe for Thanksgiving," Caroline suggested. "We could come to you this year. Mark has some business in Chicago in November anyway." After they hung up, Felinor sat with her embroidery forgotten in her lap. The conversation had been the warmest in years, sparked by something as simple as a handmade bookmark and computer classes. Perhaps Nathaniel's suggestion about selling online wasn't as outlandish as she'd initially thought. If it could also serve as a bridge to reconnecting with her daughter, it might be worth exploring. The next day brought unwelcome news. The community center director, Mrs. Hayes, announced budget cuts that threatened to eliminate the senior programs Felinor had come to rely upon, not just for learning technology, but for social connection in a world where isolation often accompanied aging. "The city has reduced our funding by 30%, Mrs. Hayes explained to the concerned seniors gathered in the main hall. "We're trying to find alternative funding sources, but for now, we need to prioritize programs for at-risk youth. The senior technology workshops will be suspended indefinitely starting next month." Felinor felt a wave of disappointment. Just as she was gaining confidence with computers and considering Nathaniel's suggestion about online selling, this opportunity was being taken away. Around her, other seniors expressed similar dismay. Many lived alone and counted on these workshops, not just for learning but for regular social interaction. Later that week, during what would be one of the final technology sessions, Felinor arrived early to find Nathaniel in conversation with Mrs. Hayes. They spoke in hushed tones, but Felinor couldn't help overhearing snippets of their discussion. "Could easily provide the funding," Nathaniel was saying. "Nextech's community outreach budget is substantial." "We appreciate the offer," Mrs. Hayes replied, "but the board has already allocated those resources to the Youth Coding Initiative. They feel it has more long-term impact." "Both programs are valuable," Nathaniel argued. "The senior population is increasingly isolated by technology rather than connected by it. These workshops address a critical need." Mrs. Hayes sighed. "I agree, Nathaniel, but I don't make these decisions. Your board has determined its priorities." Felinor stepped back, processing what she'd heard. Nathaniel sat on the board that had cut funding to senior programs while directing resources elsewhere. his company could have prevented the cuts but had chosen not to. The revelation cast his generosity toward her in a different light. Was his help to one senior merely a token gesture, while systems that could support many were being dismantled? When Nathaniel noticed her, his smile faltered at her expression. "Felinor, good morning. I didn't see you come in." "Evidently." "Not," she replied, her tone cooler than usual. "I'll come back when the session is ready to begin." Throughout the class, Felinor maintained a polite distance, participating minimally and avoiding the friendly banter they had developed over weeks of classes. After the session concluded, Nathaniel approached her as she gathered her belongings. "Is everything all right, Felinor? You seem upset." She considered deflecting but decided on honesty. "I overheard your conversation with Mrs. Hayes. Your company could fund the senior programs, but has chosen to direct resources elsewhere." Nathaniel's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. "It's more complicated than that. The board—" "Your board," Felinor corrected, "of which you are a member." "Yes, my board," he acknowledged. "We have to make difficult decisions about resource allocation. The Youth Coding Initiative reaches underserved communities and creates pathways to tech careers. And the senior programs. Do they not serve a vital function as well?" Felinor challenged. "Or is teaching old dogs new tricks not exciting enough for corporate philanthropy?" Nathaniel winced at her sharp tone. "That's not fair, Felinor. I advocated for maintaining both programs, but I was outvoted. In a perfect world, we'd fund everything, but resources are finite." "Yet you had no trouble funding a prepaid card for a stranger," she observed. "Individual charity is commendable, Nathaniel, but it doesn't address systemic needs. These programs provide community and purpose for dozens of seniors who might otherwise be completely isolated." Her words struck a nerve. Nathaniel had always prided himself on his philanthropic efforts, but Felinor's criticism revealed a blind spot. His wealth had allowed him to help individuals, but had he been neglecting his responsibility to advocate for systemic support of vulnerable populations? "You're right," he admitted after a moment of reflection. "I can do more. I'll bring it up again at the next board meeting and push harder for reconsideration." Felinor's expression softened slightly. "I'd appreciate that. Not just for myself, but for everyone who depends on these programs." She hesitated, then added, "I apologize if I spoke too harshly. It's a subject close to my heart." "No apology necessary," Nathaniel assured her. "Honest feedback is valuable, especially when it challenges us to do better." As Felinor left the community center, she reflected on their exchange. Their fragile friendship had become strained as she confronted him about wealth responsibility, revealing her deep-seated belief that the wealthy often failed to understand real struggles. Yet his willingness to listen and reconsider gave her hope that perhaps he was different, that he might use his influence not just for individual acts of kindness, but for broader impact. Meanwhile, Felinor's arthritis worsened, making her crafting work increasingly difficult. The cold Chicago winter exacerbated her symptoms, and some mornings she could barely hold her knitting needles. This physical limitation forced her to reconsider Nathaniel's technological solutions. Perhaps digital tools could help her continue creating despite her physical challenges. When will Felinor's crafting dream take flight? And what obstacle will threaten to ground it before it even begins? Find out in the next part of our story. The following Wednesday, Felinor reluctantly approached Nathaniel after the technology workshop. "My daughter suggested I look into selling crafts online," she began, setting aside their previous tension. "She mentioned a website called Etsy. Is that the platform you were referring to?" Nathaniel nodded, pleasantly surprised by her inquiry. "Yes, exactly. It's specifically for handmade and vintage items. Would you like me to show you how it works?" "If you have time," Felinor replied. "My arthritis has been acting up, making traditional crafting more challenging. I need to find ways to work around my limitations." Nathaniel's eyes lit up with understanding. "Actually, there are technological solutions that might help with that too. Voice recognition software could help you avoid typing when your hands are painful. There are also ergonomic tools designed specifically for artisans with arthritis." Over the next hour, Nathaniel introduced her to simple voice recognition and accessibility tools that could help her work around her physical limitations. Felinor watched attentively as he demonstrated how to dictate text instead of typing, how to navigate websites with voice commands, and how to adjust display settings for easier viewing. "This is remarkable," she admitted, as she successfully dictated a sample product description. "I had no idea technology could be so accommodating." "That's the beauty of good design," Nathaniel explained. "Technology should adapt to human needs, not the other way around." As they continued their impromptu session, Felinor shared photographs of her recently completed projects. Nathaniel was genuinely impressed by the quality and artistry of her work. Delicately embroidered landscapes, intricately patterned, scarves and greeting cards featuring hand-painted Chicago landmarks. "These are museum-quality pieces, Felinor," he said, examining an embroidered scene of Buckingham Fountain. "You could definitely find a market for them online." Felinor felt a flush of pride at his praise. "They keep my hands busy and my mind engaged. That's reward enough." "But they could also provide additional income," Nathaniel pointed out gently, "and bring joy to people beyond your immediate circle." As their session concluded, Nathaniel offered to help her set up an online shop the following week. Felinor agreed, her initial reluctance giving way to cautious optimism about this new venture. That evening, Felinor received an unexpected call. Her daughter Caroline's voice sounded strained on the other end of the line. "Mum, I'm sorry, but we need to cancel our Thanksgiving plans. Mark's business trip was rescheduled, and Lily has an important recital that weekend." Felinor felt a familiar disappointment settle in her chest, but kept her voice neutral. "I understand, dear, perhaps another time." "It's just that things are so busy right now," Caroline continued, guilt evident in her rush of explanations. "With Mark's promotion and the kids' activities—" "You don't need to explain," Felinor interrupted gently. "I know you have your own lives." She paused, then added, "I've been quite busy myself, actually. I'm learning to sell my crafts online." That's wonderful, Mom," Caroline replied, sounding genuinely surprised. "How did you figure all that out?" "I have a friend helping me," Felinor said, surprising herself by referring to Nathaniel as a friend. "He's quite knowledgeable about technology." There was a brief silence before Caroline spoke again. "A friend? Someone from the community center?" "Yes, he volunteers teaching technology to seniors. He's been very helpful." The conversation shifted then, with Caroline asking more questions about Felinor's crafting and her new venture. There was a note of respect in her voice that hadn't been present before, as though seeing her mother taking on new challenges had altered her perception. After they hung up, Felinor sat with mixed emotions. Disappointment over the cancelled visit mingled with a strange sense of empowerment. Her life was changing in unexpected ways. Though her daughter's visit had fallen through, she wasn't sitting idle waiting for family to remember her. She was creating a new chapter for herself, one that included new skills, renewed creative pursuits, and yes, new friendships. During this period, as winter deepened its hold on Chicago, Felinor's relationship with Nathaniel evolved. Their initial roles of benefactor and recipient gradually gave way to a more balanced friendship based on mutual respect. Nathaniel valued Felinor's forthright nature and life wisdom, while she came to appreciate his genuine desire to use his resources and knowledge to help others. The local winter market approached, an important cultural event in Chicago where artisans showcased their work in the magnificent setting of Navy Pier, decorated for the holiday season. The event drew thousands of visitors, seeking unique gifts and crafts. Securing a booth was both expensive and competitive, with applications submitted months in advance. 2 weeks before the market, Nathaniel approached Felinor after their regular technology session. "I have a proposition for you," he began, his expression a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. "A vendor at the winter market had to cancel due to a family emergency. I know the organizer, and she offered me the spot. I thought perhaps you might like to use it to showcase your crafts." Felinor's eyes widened. "The winter market? Nathaniel, those booths cost hundreds of dollars, and the application deadline was months ago." "The spot is already paid for," he explained. "It would be a shame to let it go to waste." Your work deserves to be seen, Felina. She hesitated, torn between excitement at the opportunity and suspicion that Nathaniel wasn't being entirely transparent. Did you pay for this? Booth specifically for me? Nathaniel's slight flush confirmed her suspicion. The opportunity genuinely arose because of a cancellation, he clarified. But yes, I did think of you immediately and offered to take the spot. Is that so terrible? Felina considered his question seriously. Was it terrible to accept such help? Once her pride would have provided an immediate answer. Yes, it was unacceptable to rely on others' generosity. But these past months had taught her that interdependence wasn't weakness. It was the natural state of human communities. No, she finally answered. It's not terrible. It's kind, and I'm grateful. But I insist on paying you back from my sales. Deal, Nathaniel agreed readily, though they both knew the likelihood of first-time sales covering the booth fee was slim. The market starts next Friday. Will you have enough inventory? Felina mentally catalogued her completed pieces. I have about 20 items finished. Is that enough for a respectable display? It's a start, Nathaniel replied thoughtfully. But ideally you'd have more variety to attract different customers. Felina nodded, a familiar determination settling over her features. Then I'd better get to work. My hands will just have to cooperate for the next week. The following days found Felina working with renewed purpose, pushing through the pain in her joints to complete additional pieces. She worked smart, scheduling breaks and using hot compresses to manage her arthritis. The voice recognition software Nathaniel had introduced allowed her to create product descriptions and pricing lists without the discomfort of typing. 3 days before the market, Nathaniel visited Felina's apartment to help her prepare display materials. It was his first time seeing her home, a modest but impeccably maintained one-bedroom apartment filled with books, family photographs, and small mementos from a life well lived. The living room had been transformed into a crafting studio with works in progress carefully arranged on every available surface. You've been productive, Nathaniel observed, genuinely impressed by the quantity and quality of work she had completed. Nothing motivates like a deadline, Felina replied with a small smile, setting down the teacups she had brought from the kitchen. I've managed to complete 15 additional pieces. Nathaniel had brought materials to create professional-looking display cards and price tags. Together they photographed each item and created a cohesive presentation strategy. As they worked, Felina shared stories behind certain pieces, the embroidered Chicago theater marquee, inspired by her first date with Gerald, the lakefront scene where they had picnicked with young Caroline, the botanical patterns derived from her mother's garden. Your work is so personal, Nathaniel remarked. Each piece carries a story. Isn't that true of all handcrafted things? Felina replied. They carry the imprint of their maker's experiences and memories. That's what makes them special. By evening, they had completed the preparation tasks. As Nathaniel prepared to leave, Felina handed him a small package wrapped in tissue paper. A thank you, she explained, for all your help. Nathaniel unwrapped the gift to find a handsome embroidered bookmark featuring the Chicago skyline at sunset, executed in rich colors that captured the city's vibrant energy. Felina, this is exquisite, he said, genuinely moved by the gesture. I noticed you always have a book with you, she explained. Old-fashioned paper books, not those electronic readers. I thought you might use it. I'll treasure it, he promised, carefully returning it to its tissue wrapping. And I look forward to seeing your success at the market. The winter market opened the following Friday evening with a special preview for invited guests and press. Nathaniel had secured Felina a prime location near the main entrance, where foot traffic would be heaviest. He never mentioned he had paid a premium for the spot, allowing Felina to believe it was simply luck of the draw. Felina arrived early, nervous energy making her more sprite than her arthritis typically allowed. Nathaniel helped her set up the display, arranging her creations artfully on the rustic wooden table and shelving he had provided. Each item bore a professionally printed tag with its name, price, and a brief description of the inspiration or technique. As the first visitors began to arrive, Felina straightened her navy dress, her best saved for special occasions, and reminded herself to smile. "What if no one buys anything?" she whispered to Nathaniel as the crowd grew. "Then they're missing out on owning something extraordinary," he replied confidently. "But I don't think that will be the case. Just be yourself, Felina. Your passion for your work will speak to the right customers." Nathaniel's prediction proved accurate. By the end of the preview evening, Felinor had sold 7 pieces, including her most expensive item, an elaborately embroidered skyline scene that caught the eye of an interior designer looking for unique Chicago-themed art for a client's office. "I can't believe it," Felinor said as they packed up for the night. "People actually want these things I make with my old hands." "Of course they do," Nathaniel replied. "Your work has soul, Felinor. That's increasingly rare and valuable in our mass-produced world." The market continued through the weekend. Felinor's booth attracted steady interest, particularly for her embroidered Chicago landmarks and scenes. Several customers commented on the distinctive quality of her work and asked if she had a website or shop where they could find more. By Sunday afternoon, Felinor had sold nearly 2/3 of her inventory and taken custom orders for 6 additional pieces. As the market drew to a close, she sat with Nathaniel, tallying receipts and marveling at her success. "After expenses, I've cleared over $800, she announced, her voice reflecting her astonishment. "In just one weekend." "And you've made valuable contacts," Nathaniel added. "The custom orders alone could keep you busy for weeks." As they discussed the experience, a woman approached their booth. Her tasteful attire and professional demeanor suggested she wasn't a typical browser. "Excuse me," she began, extending a business card to Felinor. "I'm Catherine Delaney, buyer for the Chicago Artisan Collective. We're a high-end boutique in the Gold Coast neighborhood that features local artists. I was wondering if you might be interested in supplying items for our shop on a consignment basis." Felinor glanced at Nathaniel, momentarily overwhelmed by the opportunity. He gave her an encouraging nod. "I'm certainly interested," she replied, finding her voice. "What kind of arrangement do you typically offer?" Catherine explained the terms. The shop would display Felinor's work and handle sales, taking a percentage of the purchase price. Felinor would need to supply a minimum number of items monthly and could feature up to 3 different product lines. The opportunity was exciting, but intimidating. Felinor lacked the production capability to fulfill large orders regularly. This obstacle seemed insurmountable until Catherine added, "We find that many of our artisans work together in informal collectives to meet production demands while maintaining handcrafted quality. Do you have associates who might collaborate with you?" Before Felinor could respond, Nathaniel spoke up. "Actually, there are several skilled crafters at the community center who might be interested in such a partnership. Each has their own specialties that could complement Felinor's work." Catherine seemed pleased with this suggestion. "Perfect. That would give us more variety as well," Catherine said. "Why don't you take my card, discuss it with your potential partners, and get back to me by the end of the week?" She shook Felinor's hand. "Your work truly captures the spirit of Chicago. We'd be delighted to feature it in our shop." After Catherine left, Felinor turned to Nathaniel with wide eyes. "Did that really just happen? A high-end boutique wants my creations?" "It absolutely did," Nathaniel confirmed with a smile. "And it's well-deserved recognition." As they packed up the remaining inventory, Felinor's mind raced. The opportunity exceeded her wildest expectations, but the production requirements seemed daunting. "I don't know if I can manage the volume they need," she admitted. "My hands simply won't cooperate some days." "That's where the collaborative approach comes in," Nathaniel explained. "I know several seniors from the community center with complementary crafting skills. Mrs. Henderson does beautiful knitting, Mr. Romano is skilled with woodworking, and Mrs. Patel creates gorgeous, hand-painted ceramics. Together, you could create a diverse collection while sharing the production load." "You seem to have thought this through already," Felinor observed, a hint of suspicion in her voice. Nathaniel had the grace to look slightly abashed. "I might have mentioned your work to a few people at the center. They expressed interest in collaborating if an opportunity arose." "So you orchestrated this too?" Fellinor asked, her tone sharpening. First the grocery payment, then the prepaid card, the winter market booth, and now a ready-made crafting collective. Not orchestrated, Nathaniel corrected gently. Facilitated, perhaps. The opportunities were genuine, Fellinor. I just helped connect the dots. They finished packing in uncomfortable silence. As Nathaniel loaded the last box into his car to drive Fellinor home, she finally spoke. Why me, Nathaniel? Of all the struggling seniors in Chicago, why have you invested so much in helping me specifically? Nathaniel considered her question as they drove through the winter evening, Chicago's skyline glittering against the dark sky. When I saw you in that supermarket, he began, carefully returning items to the shelves, I recognized something. Dignity in the face of hardship. It reminded me of my grandmother. So I'm a stand-in for your grandmother? Fellinor asked, her tone softer than her words. No, Nathaniel replied firmly. You're yourself, Fellinor Wilder, a remarkably talented woman who gave decades to educating children and caring for your husband, only to find yourself struggling in retirement. But it's more than that. He paused, gathering his thoughts. My childhood wasn't easy after my parents died. My grandmother was my rock, but we had so little. When I found success, she was already gone. I couldn't help her, but I promised myself I would help others like her when I had the means. Noble intentions, Fellinor acknowledged, but there's a difference between helping and controlling. Sometimes your assistance feels manipulative, as though you're orchestrating my life according to your vision of what it should be. They had reached her apartment building, and Nathaniel parked but made no move to exit the car. That was never my intention, he said quietly. I apologize if my actions have felt controlling rather than supportive. Fellinor studied his face in the dim light, seeing genuine regret. Your wealthy but emotionally distant upbringing has left you seeking meaningful connections, she observed. Your financial help masks your loneliness and desire to create the supportive community you never had. Nathaniel looked startled at her perceptiveness. How did you— I was a teacher for 43 years, Fellinor reminded him with a small smile. You learn to read people, and you're not as mysterious as you might think. This revelation shifted their relationship. The dynamic between them had been transformed from that of a privileged benefactor and a recipient to two people who recognized each other's vulnerabilities and strengths. Their conversation continued long into the evening as they unloaded the car and organized Fellinor's apartment, discussing the potential of the crafting collective and how it might work. By the time Nathaniel left, they had reached a new understanding. Fellinor would contact the other seniors about forming a collective, but she would lead the effort herself rather than having Nathaniel arrange everything. He would provide technical support and business advice when asked, but would respect her autonomy in making decisions. The next morning, Fellinor called Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Romano, and Mrs. Patel, inviting them to meet at her apartment to discuss the boutique opportunity. All three expressed interest, having already heard about Fellinor's success at the winter market through the community center grapevine. That afternoon, the four seniors gathered in Fellinor's small living room. Tea was served in her best cups, and samples of each person's work were displayed on the coffee table. Mrs. Henderson's intricately knitted scarves and hats, Mr. Romano's handcrafted wooden picture frames and small boxes, Mrs. Patel's delicately painted ceramic mugs and plates, and Fellinor's embroidered pieces. The boutique wants regular shipments of handcrafted items with a Chicago theme, Fellinor explained, sharing the details of Catherine's offer. Individually, none of us could meet their volume requirements, but together we might have a chance. Mrs. Patel, a soft-spoken woman with silver-streaked black hair, nodded thoughtfully. I could create designs featuring Chicago landmarks on my ceramics to match your embroidery themes, Fellinor. And I could craft frames specifically sized for your embroidered scenes, Mr. Romano added, his accent still carrying traces of his Italian heritage despite 6 decades in Chicago. Mrs. Henderson, always practical, raised the important question. How would we divide the proceeds fairly, and who would manage the business side, tracking inventory, communicating with the boutique, handling finances? I suggest we divide earnings based on the sale price of each person's items, minus a Small percentage for collective expenses, Felinor proposed. As for management, I'm willing to handle the boutique communications and financial tracking if you're all agreeable. The seniors formed a crafting collective, with Felinor naturally assuming a leadership role despite her initial reluctance. Her teaching background emerged as she patiently trained others, creating a supportive environment where skills were shared and creativity encouraged. The collective became more than a business. It provided purpose and community for its members. They named their enterprise Skilled Hands, reflecting both their artisanal expertise and their age. Within a week, they had drafted a business plan and production schedule to present to Catherine at the Chicago Artisan Collective. Nathaniel provided guidance on creating a simple accounting system and helped them establish a shared digital workspace where they could track inventory and sales. The boutique was impressed with their professionalism and diverse product offerings. They signed an initial 3-month contract with the potential for renewal and expansion if sales were strong. The first month was challenging as they established workflows and production rhythms, but by the second month, they had settled into a productive routine. The seniors met twice weekly in a dedicated space at the community center, which Mrs. Hayes had offered after hearing about their venture. These sessions became both work periods and social gatherings, with members sharing stories, techniques, and laughter as they created their pieces. Other seniors began to drop by, curious about the enterprise, and occasionally offered their own skills. Mrs. Guzman's expertise in beadwork, Mr. Chen's talent for calligraphy. Nathaniel kept his promise to step back, offering assistance only when asked. He continued teaching technology workshops at the center, having successfully convinced his board to restore funding for senior programs. The decision came after he arranged for board members to attend a Skilled Hands work session, where they witnessed firsthand the impact of community support on seniors' well-being and productivity. Winter deepened in Chicago, bringing severe storms that caused power outages throughout the region. Felana's apartment building, primarily housing seniors, lost heat for 3 days during the worst blizzard in decades. The temperature inside the apartments dropped to dangerous levels, particularly concerning for elderly residents with health issues. Nathaniel learned of the situation through Mrs. Hayes and immediately drove his 4-wheel-drive vehicle through snow-clogged streets to check on Felinor. He found her bundled in multiple layers, stubbornly refusing to leave despite the cold that aggravated her arthritis. "This is not a request, Felinor," he said firmly, after assessing the situation. "Hypothermia is a real risk at these temperatures. I'm taking you and as many of your neighbors as possible to my home until power is restored." "Your home?" Felinor questioned, surprised by the offer. "I have plenty of space, a generator for backup power, and enough supplies to host several people comfortably," he explained. "Please, let me help." Felinor recognized the genuine concern in his eyes and relented, not just for herself but for her neighbors. Together they went door to door in the building, identifying the most vulnerable residents and arranging transportation. By evening, Nathaniel had converted his spacious home into an impromptu shelter for Felina and 5 other seniors from her building. What surprised Felina most was the simplicity of Nathaniel's living space. Despite his wealth, his home was modestly furnished with comfortable, quality pieces rather than ostentatious displays of luxury. Books filled the shelves: literature, history, science, and art, many well worn from repeated reading. His kitchen was designed for actual cooking rather than show, with practical appliances and ample workspace. "Not what you expected?" Nathaniel asked, noticing her assessment of his home. "I confess I imagined something more extravagant," Felinor admitted. "This feels lived in, personal." "Money doesn't necessarily translate to taste," he replied with a self-deprecating smile. "And I spend most of my time working or volunteering. The house just needs to be comfortable." Over the 3 days that the seniors sheltered with Nathaniel, barriers broke down as they shared meals, played board games, and weathered the storm together. Nathaniel revealed more of himself than he had in all their previous interactions. His passion for education reform, his struggles with maintaining meaningful relationships amid business demands, his desire to create technology that connected rather than isolated people. This emergency situation accelerated the developing trust between Felinor and her neighbors, creating bonds that would extend beyond the crisis. It also deepened her understanding of Nathaniel, revealing the thoughtful, somewhat solitary man behind the successful entrepreneur facade. When power was finally restored and the roads cleared, Nathaniel drove everyone back to their apartments. As he helped Felinor carry her belongings inside, she paused in the doorway. "Thank you," she said simply, "not just for the shelter, but for showing us who you really are." "Sometimes it takes a crisis to break down the walls we build," Nathaniel replied, surprising himself with the candor of his response. 6 months after their supermarket encounter, the Skilled Hands Collective received a large holiday order from the Chicago Artisan Collective that could financially secure them for months. The boutique had expanded to a second location and wanted to feature the collective's work prominently in their holiday displays and gift selections. However, production challenges and shipping delays threatened the opportunity. Several members were facing health issues that slowed their work, and a supplier's bankruptcy had left them scrambling for alternative sources of specialized materials. The timeline seemed impossible to meet. Felinor's problem-solving skills shone as she reorganized workflows and negotiated timeline extensions, demonstrating business acumen she didn't know she possessed. She arranged for tasks to be redistributed based on each member's health and capacity, created a contingency plan for material sourcing, and personally visited the new boutique location to discuss realistic delivery schedules. "You've become quite the entrepreneur," Nathaniel remarked one evening as they reviewed the collective's production plans on her tablet. "You've established systems that many startups would envy." "Necessity is a powerful teacher," Felinor replied, "and managing a classroom of 30 energetic third graders prepares you for nearly any logistical challenge." Through determination and teamwork, the collective fulfilled the holiday order on time. The success brought not only financial security, but also recognition, with a local newspaper featuring their story as an example of senior entrepreneurship and community building. The article highlighted how the collective had expanded to include 12 regular members and 5 occasional contributors, creating a supportive network that addressed both economic needs and social connection. Have you ever experienced or known someone who formed an unexpected friendship across generational lines that changed their life? Share your story in the comments. The publicity brought more opportunities. A corporate client commissioned custom pieces for employee appreciation. Gifts. A hotel chain inquired about featuring local art in their Chicago properties. The collective even received an invitation to participate in a major craft exposition in the spring. With success came new challenges. The increased demand required more structured business practices than their informal arrangements could support. After much discussion, the collective decided to establish themselves as an official limited liability company, with profits shared among members according to contribution. Felinor, who had initially resisted accepting help, now found herself leading not just a business but a community. The transformation in her life over 6 months was remarkable. From counting pennies for groceries to managing a growing enterprise, from isolated widowhood to meaningful connection with peers and a renewed relationship with her daughter Caroline, who had been surprisingly supportive of the venture. The success of the collective had ripple effects on the community center as well. The senior programs now received stable funding, thanks partly to Nathaniel's advocacy and partly to the positive publicity generated by Skilled Hands. The technology workshops expanded to include business applications specifically relevant to senior entrepreneurs, with members of the collective occasionally serving as guest instructors, sharing their experiences and inspiring others. During a community center fundraising event, Felinor proudly presented a check from the collective to support senior programs, coming full circle from recipient to contributor. Her emotional speech about rediscovering purpose touched many, including her daughter Caroline, who had flown in from Seattle to surprise her mother. "Mom, I'm so proud of you," Caroline said, embracing Felinor after the presentation. "You've created something amazing here." "I had help," Felinor replied, glancing toward Nathaniel, who stood at the back of the room, allowing her to have her moment in the spotlight. "I know," Caroline acknowledged. "You've told me about your friend Nathaniel in our calls. I'd like to meet him while I'm here." The reunion between mother and daughter had been tentative at first, with years of misunderstandings creating a chasm between them. But through regular video calls, facilitated by Felenor's new tech skills, they had begun rebuilding their relationship. Caroline had listened with growing respect as Felenor shared the collective's progress, offering business insights from her own experience in corporate marketing. Now, as they introduced Caroline to Nathaniel, Felenor observed the easy rapport that developed between them. Caroline's initial wariness gave way to genuine appreciation as she recognized the positive influence he had had on her mother's life. They discussed the collective's potential for expansion, with Caroline offering to help establish an online presence that could reach customers nationwide. "You've given my mother back her sense of purpose," Caroline told Nathaniel privately. "I wasn't there for her when she needed support, but you were. Thank you for that." "Your mother is an extraordinary woman," Nathaniel replied. "All she needed was someone to recognize her value and potential. The rest she accomplished herself." What will the future hold for Felenor and Nathaniel as their unexpected bond grows stronger? The answer might surprise you. As the 1-year mark of their chance meeting approached, Felenor invited Nathaniel to tea in her apartment, the first time she had extended such an invitation. The modest but dignified home reflected her personality, practical, warm, and filled with memories. Family photographs shared space with creative supplies and samples of her latest designs. Books lined the shelves, classics, history, poetry, and recently added volumes on business and technology. Nathaniel arrived bearing a bouquet of autumn flowers and a small wrapped package. Felenor welcomed him warmly, noticing how comfortable his presence in her home now felt, a stark contrast to her initial suspicion of his motivations. She served tea in her late mother's china cups, a small luxury she now allowed herself to enjoy, rather than keeping the set carefully stored away. As they settled in her small sitting area, sunshine streaming through the windows despite the crisp October air outside, Felenor felt a sense of contentment that had been absent for too long. "It's hard to believe it's been almost a year since that day at the supermarket," she remarked, passing him a plate of homemade shortbread. "A year of remarkable changes," Nathaniel agreed, accepting the offering. "For both of us, I think." Felenor nodded thoughtfully. "When you offered to pay for my groceries, I was mortified. Accepting help felt like admitting defeat somehow." "And now you're providing opportunities for others," Nathaniel pointed out. "The collective has become a model that other senior centers are looking to replicate." "We've received inquiries from 3 centers in different neighborhoods," Felenor confirmed. "They want to know how we established our group and made it successful." They spoke of the collective's growth, the new members who had joined, and the expanding market for their creations. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by comfortable silences that no longer needed to be filled. After their second cup of tea, Felenor rose and retrieved a package from her crafting table. "I have something for you," she said, returning to her seat. "A small token of appreciation for all you've done this past year." Nathaniel accepted the parcel, wrapped in simple brown paper and tied with twine in a way that made packaging itself an art form. Inside, he found a handcrafted album bound in deep blue linen embroidered with subtle silver threads that caught the light as he turned it. Opening the album, he discovered a carefully curated documentation of the collective's journey. Photographs, news clippings, samples of designs and handwritten notes chronicled the evolution from a small group of individual crafters to a thriving community enterprise. Interspersed were personal reflections from collective members about how the experience had impacted their lives. "Felenor, this is extraordinary," Nathaniel said, genuinely moved as he turned the pages. "You've documented everything so beautifully." "It seemed important to record this journey," she explained, "not just for ourselves, but for others who might follow a similar path. Each of us has found renewed purpose through the collective, and that deserves to be celebrated." As Nathaniel reached the final pages, he discovered they were blank except for a handwritten note. The story continues. Below this, Felenor had outlined her vision for the collective's next chapter, establishing a mentorship program connecting seniors with local youth, teaching traditional crafts while learning modern technology from their young partners. "This is the surprise I wanted to share with you," Felinor explained. "We've been approached by the high school arts program about creating an intergenerational workshop series. They're interested in having their students learn traditional crafting techniques from our members, while the students could help us expand our digital presence and explore new technologies for creation and marketing." "That's brilliant," Nathaniel exclaimed. "It addresses needs on both sides while building community connections." "Exactly," Felinor agreed, "but we need more than just financial backing. We need a partner who understands both the craft tradition and the technological possibilities." She hesitated briefly before continuing. "I'm asking for your partnership in bridging these generational gaps, offering you genuine belonging in the community we've built together." Nathaniel was visibly touched by her offer. "I'd be honored to be part of this new venture," he replied. "Actually, I have something to share with you as well." He handed her the small package he had brought. Felinor unwrapped it to find a sleek tablet, more advanced than the one she currently used for collective business. "This is very generous, but it's more than just a gift," Nathaniel explained. "It's a prototype developed by my company's new division, technology specifically designed for senior users, with intuitive interfaces, accessibility features, and durability." "You inspired this entire initiative, Felinor." "I did?" she asked, surprised. "Watching you and the others learn to use technology for your collective showed me how poorly most devices are designed for older users," Nathaniel explained. "My company is launching a nationwide initiative to support senior entrepreneurs, inspired entirely by your journey. The program will provide technological tools, business education, and startup funding, specifically designed for seniors with untapped creative and professional potential." "From a chance meeting at a supermarket to a national initiative," Felinor marveled, shaking her head in wonderment. Who could have predicted this? Together, they had created something neither could have accomplished alone, a model of intergenerational cooperation built on mutual respect rather than charity. Their unexpected friendship had transcended financial transactions to become a powerful force for community transformation, proving that everyone, regardless of age or circumstance, has valuable gifts to share. Over the next hour, they refined their vision for the mentorship program and discussed how Nathaniel's initiative could support similar collectives nationwide. The conversation was balanced, with each contributing ideas and respectfully challenging the other when needed, a true partnership of equals despite their different backgrounds and resources. As afternoon faded toward evening, Nathaniel reluctantly prepared to leave for a business dinner. At the door, Felinor paused, considering how to express what this friendship had come to mean to her. "You know," she said finally, "when Gerald was alive, he always said that we should judge people not by what they have, but by what they give. Not just materially, but in time, attention, and genuine care. By that measure, you're the wealthiest man I know, Nathaniel." He smiled, touched by her words. "My grandmother used to say something similar. She'd tell me, true wealth is counted in relationships, not bank accounts. I think she and Gerald would have gotten along well." "I believe they would have," Felinor agreed, "and they'd both be proud of what we've built here." As Nathaniel headed to his car, Felinor called after him. "Same time next week? The collective wants your input on the spring exhibition designs." "I wouldn't miss it," he replied, waving as he departed. Felinor stood at her doorway, watching until his car disappeared around the corner. Her life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined that day in the supermarket. From financial struggle and isolation to purpose and community. From reluctant recipient of help to confident leader and mentor. Her final words to Nathaniel captured the essence of their journey. "Sometimes the most valuable currency isn't in your wallet, but in believing someone has something worthwhile to contribute to the world, even when they've forgotten it themselves." That evening, as Felinor sat with her crafting, the winter light fading outside her window, she reflected on the year's unexpected gifts, not just financial security, but renewed purpose, deepened relationships, and the joy of creating both beautiful objects and meaningful connections. The simple act of one person recognizing another's value had sparked a transformation that rippled outward, touching many lives. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she would face them with confidence, surrounded by the community she and Nathaniel had built together, a community where age was seen not as a limitation, but as a resource, where different generations learned from each other, and where everyone's contributions were valued. The future stretched before her, not as the lonely decline she had once feared, but as a canvas for continued creation, connection, and contribution. And for that unexpected gift, the gift of possibility in what had seemed like the twilight of her life, she was profoundly grateful. Congratulations. Type 9 in the comments so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.